Stop the violence. Stop the authorities' indifference toward a problem growing every day, leaving Honduran families with only pain and grief.
That's Julio Velázquez, spokesperson for the National Commission of Human Rights in Honduras. On Channel 36 in July, the commission reported over 6 massacres since the state of exception was enacted in December 2022. I'm Roman Gressier, the editor of Faro English. This is our weekly podcast, Central American Minutes.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
they say globalism comes to die at CPAC, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes on Faro English.
It's Friday, November 22nd, and today we turn first to the human rights toll of the state of exception in Honduras, which on December 3rd will have been in effect for 2 years now. In an interview with El Faro English in late November 2022, days before it was instated, former Honduran Secretary of Security Ramon Savillon admitted that the state of exception, which the government called a war against extortion, had clear political overtones. He told me, "A society must attack crime at the root, not only repress. But the thing is that people don't like preventative measures. They want a hard fist." Savillon tried to distance the Castro administration from the state of exception in El Salvador, which by then had been in effect for 8 months. The secretary said, "We're taking an alternative route. We created the Office for Rehabilitation, Resocialization, and Reinsertion. We can now take both steps as opposed to the other model, so that ours will not be invasive of dignity or human rights." A new investigation by Cicloscap reports that the government's record has been nothing short of invasive. The National Commission for Human Rights in Honduras has registered over 600 complaints against security forces for crimes ranging from beatings and rapes to forced disappearances. The report has suggested this number is an undercount. The Commission, meanwhile, says that 95% of arrests are for minor infractions and only 3% for extortions. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights has urged the Castro administration to demilitarize citizen security, as she pledged to do in her 2021 campaign. But Xiomara Castro has not disbanded the military police, created by her predecessor, Juan Orlando Hernandez. The military police work hand in hand with the national police under the state of exception. In May, the UN Committee Against Torture denounced the prolongation of the emergency measures and said security forces have been involved in acts of torture, forced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings. A military intelligence official who spoke with Cicloscap said operations are carried out at any time of day, without a warrant and sometimes without a clear motive to execute the order, and that in many cases, evidence is planted. An organized crime prosecutor added that the national police is, quote, using the measures to kill and steal. The source added that the relationship between Honduran police and the Maras is, quote, extremely solid, referring to the Mara Salvatrucha. You can read their full article on the website of Radio Progreso or Cicloscap. It seems particularly telling that, according to the Association for a Just Society, some 11% of the Honduran population pay extortion. That's around 300,000 households, up from 9% in 2022 when the state of exception was decreed. Now for Nicaragua, where the Ortega-Murillo regime has proposed reforms to dozens of articles of the 1986 Constitution that, in theory, must be approved by 2 legislatures. As digital outlet Confidencial outlines, the changes will place the presidency now formally in charge of the legislative and judicial branches. Religious organizations must now avoid, quote, undermining the public order, and, quote, remain free of all foreign control. It also prohibits news organizations from publishing, quote, fake news, a crime punishable by the regime's 2020 cybercrime law. It would also legalize the recent stripping of citizenship of over 300 former political prisoners. This violates the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 2 international treaties against statelessness. But the loudest slated change is the creation of the titles copresidente and copresidenta, or two co-presidents in masculine and feminine, and expands their terms from 5 to 6 years. It also stipulates that if one should die, the other maintains the presidency. This is key. Questions over the Ortega-Murillo regime's plans for dynastic succession have roiled the ruling family for 5 months. Murillo, who is 73 years old and vice president since 2017, has long informally called herself co-president, a flex of her political influence. The move dispersed any public speculation over who would be next in line to rule the regime after Ortega, who is 79. In May, the historic Sandinista General Humberto Ortega, Daniel's brother, drew their ire when he asserted in an op-ed that neither Murillo nor her son, Laureano Ortega, would be capable of filling the void should Ortega die. Humberto was placed under de facto house arrest, where he died of heart failure on September 30th. He had denounced prior to his detention that, quote, radicals in Daniel's inner circle, quote, would like to kill him. Edipcia Dubon is a coordinator of the Dialogue of Women for Democracy and an exiled former Sandinista Renovation Movement legislator. She wrote to me in May that, in her view, the regime, quote, made an example of Humberto Ortega, given his boldness in publicly commenting between the lines of his brother's death. Just one thing before our last segment. If you like Central American Minutes, consider subscribing to the signature El Faro English newsletter, where we hone in on one particular issue in Central America at least once a week. Our podcast and our newsletter go hand in hand. Subscribe by going to our front page at elfaro.net/en. Our mantra this year at El Faro English is simple: journalism must go on. Last, we turn to the United States, where Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, put out a call for new tools to augment its digital surveillance infrastructure, as The New Yorker reported this week. In September, the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE, signed a contract with Israel-based surveillance firm Paragon for $2 million. Paragon is the developer of Graphite, a spyware tool targeted at hacking services like Telegram, which is only partly encrypted, and Signal, which is the gold standard of encrypted messaging. In Trump's second term, he has promised to leverage the federal apparatus to deport millions of immigrants, including by declaring a national emergency and deploying the military to aid deportation operations. Human Rights Watch warns that giving ICE spyware risks exacerbating the surveillance and abuses against migrants, border communities, journalists, lawyers, and civil society groups. These revelations of new U.S. spyware couple with statements to the press on November 8th by the Colombian ambassador to the United States after meeting with the White House. The ambassador said that U.S. funds were used to purchase Pegasus spyware in Colombia in cash to, quote, avoid traceability, and that U.S. officials, quote, supervised use, but did not inform then-President Iván Duque. The revelations of the use of Pegasus spyware in Colombia are the latest to roil the Americas. In Panama, former President Ricardo Martinelli deployed Pegasus a decade ago against his rivals and mistress. And the identification of a Pegasus operator in El Salvador, spying on dozens of journalists and civil society members from 2020 to 2021, remains unpunished. Thanks for listening to Central American Minutes. I wrote today's episode with production and original soundtrack by Omnion. Hasta la próxima.